The Ghost Who Was No More. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave your comment about the story. Your participation is what motivates us to keep creating. Ready? Let's begin. The reflection staring back at me wasn't a ghost, but it felt like one. For 2 years, I'd allowed my ex-husband, Marcus, to erase me from the map. He'd stripped away my confidence, my home, and my future, replacing me with a younger, shinier model. Tonight was the annual gala for Apex Dynamics. The one night of the year I couldn't avoid his presence, his smug satisfaction. I was braced for the pitying glances, the whispers, and his condescending smile. I was ready for my own personal hell. What I wasn't ready for was for him to corner me, his diamond-adorned mistress on his arm, ready to deliver the final public humiliation. And I certainly wasn't ready for what I did next, or for the man whose world I was about to disrupt. The anniversary, a divorce anniversary, is a strange beast. It's not celebrated like a marriage, nor mourned like a death, but it carries the weight of both. For me, Eleanor Vance, today was it. 2 years since the ink dried on the papers that officially separated my life from Marcus Thorne's. 2 years of learning to sleep in the middle of the bed again. 2 years of referring to myself as I instead of we. My life was a quiet, neat thing now. I lived in a modest flat in London's Islington district, a place that was mine and mine alone, filled with second-hand books and thriving potted plants. My job at Apex Dynamics was my anchor. As a senior data analyst, I found solace in the clean, predictable logic of numbers. I could make sense of algorithms and predictive models. They, unlike people, never lied or unexpectedly changed their minds. I was good at my job, brilliant even, though no one knew it. I existed as a background ghost in the corporate machine, producing insightful reports that my department head, a man named Howard Bell, presented as his own with a few minor tweaks. I never complained. It was easier to be invisible. Marcus, of course, was anything but invisible. He was a vice president in the marketing department at the same company. He was charisma and ambition poured into a bespoke suit. We had met at Apex Dynamics, a classic office romance that had blossomed into what I believed was a forever love. I had supported his climb up the corporate ladder, editing his presentations late into the night, hosting dinners for his superiors, and sacrificing my own ambitions for his. I was the firm, reliable foundation upon which he built his empire. And then, when the empire was secure, he replaced the foundation. She was called Chloe. She had been his executive assistant, a 20-something with flawless skin, a sharp wardrobe, and an ambition that rivaled Marcus's. I discovered their affair through the soul-crushing classic cliché, a hotel receipt, carelessly left in a coat pocket. The confrontation was a blur of his cold, rehearsed excuses and my raw, shattered disbelief. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked relieved. "We've just drifted apart, Elle," he'd said, as if our 15 years together were a sweater he'd simply shed. The divorce was brutal. He used his corporate power and expensive lawyers to paint me as unstable and demanding. I left with a fraction of what was due to me and a gaping wound where my self-esteem used to be. He and Chloe were engaged within 6 months, which brought me to tonight. The Apex Dynamics annual gala at the Regent Grand Hotel. A night of forced smiles, cheap champagne, and corporate back-patting. It was mandatory for all employees at my level or above. For the past 2 years, I had conveniently come down with a migraine on the day of the gala, but not this year. My best friend Sophia, a high-powered lawyer who'd helped me through the worst of the divorce, had forbidden it. "You are going, Elle," she'd declared over the phone last week, her voice leaving no room for discussion. "You're going to get your hair done. You're going to wear that stunning emerald dress we bought 6 months ago that's still hiding in your closet. And you're going to walk in there with your head so high you might get a nosebleed. You are not a ghost. You helped build that company with your work. You have a right to be there." Her words resonated in my mind now as I looked in the mirror. The woman in the emerald silk dress was a stranger. The gown clung to my curves in a way that was elegant yet undeniably powerful. My brown hair, usually just practical, was swept up in a soft, intricate style. And the makeup, professionally done at Sophia's insistence, brought out my eyes and gave me a confidence I didn't feel. But as I looked into my eyes, I saw the fear. I wasn't afraid of Marcus anymore. I was afraid of the pity. I was afraid of the whispers of the colleagues who knew the whole sordid story. I was afraid of the triumphant, possessive look Chloe would give me. The look that said, "I won." My phone vibrated. It was Sophia. "It's showtime, superstar. Remember who you are. Now go make them choke on their canapes." A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time that day. She was right. Hiding had only shrunk my world until it was the size of my small flat. Tonight, I was not going in as Marcus Thorne's pathetic ex-wife. I was going as Eleanor Vance, senior data analyst. I had a name. I had a place. And for the first time in 2 years, I was determined to occupy that space. I took one last deep breath, grabbed my clutch, and walked out the door. The silk of the dress whispered promises of a night that would change everything. The showdown. The ballroom of the Regent Grand Hotel was designed to intimidate. High ceilings dripped with crystal chandeliers that cast a benevolent golden light over the mingling crowd. The air buzzed with the symphony of corporate success, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of self-congratulatory conversations, and a string quartet playing something Vivaldi-esque in a corner. For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. This was Marcus's world, the world of handshakes, networking, and superficial charm. My world was the quiet hum of a server room and the black and white of a spreadsheet. Taking a steadying breath, I handed my coat to an attendant and stepped into the fray. The first few minutes were the hardest. I could feel the subtle shift in the room's energy as people noticed me. It was a ripple of recognition followed by quickly averted eyes and low whispers. I saw Eliza from accounting nudge her husband, her eyes wide. I saw Peter from logistics give me a small, pitying smile. It was exactly what I had feared. I was a spectacle. The ghost had materialized, and no one quite knew what to do with her. I headed straight for the bar, needing a proper shield. "Champagne, please," I told the bartender, my voice firmer than I felt. "Elle, is that you?" I turned to see my department head, Howard Bell, standing next to me, his eyes slightly bulging. "Wow, you look really great," he said, the compliment landing with all the grace of a dropped filing cabinet. "Hello, Howard," I said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you too. Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you were allergic to fun," he chuckled, oblivious as always. Howard was the man who had built his career on my analytical work. Just last month, my deep dive into market vulnerabilities, a project I'd put in 80-hour weeks on and code-named Project Chimera, had led directly to the company preempting a major competitor move, saving us about $50 million. Howard had presented the findings to the board and received a hefty bonus. I had received a company-wide email thanking Howard Bell and his team for their hard work. Before I could formulate a polite response, a new voice cut through the air, sharp and sickeningly sweet. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in." And there he was, Marcus. He stood there, a vision of bespoke perfection in a Tom Ford tuxedo, a self-satisfied smirk plastered across his handsome face. And on his arm, clinging to him like expensive ivy, was Chloe. She wore a crimson gown that looked sprayed onto her, and a massive diamond engagement ring that caught the light with every slight movement. It was a calculated display of everything I had lost. "Breathe, Elle. Da-da-da-da. Head up, head up. Marcus," I said. My voice was cool and even-toned, a pitch that even surprised me. "Chloe, you both look, well." Marcus's smile broadened. He thrived on this, on having both his past and present on display, with him being the undisputed prize. "We are. Business is booming. Life is good. You remember Chloe?" Chloe, of course, gave me a smile that didn't reach her cold, appraising eyes. "Elle, it's so brave of you to come." Brave. The word was a perfectly aimed dart, framing me as a victim, a charity case. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to flee, to retreat to the safety of my quiet flat. But then I saw the look in Marcus's eyes. It was pity, yes, but underneath it was a deep, unshakable arrogance. The look of a man who believed he had completely broken me and had won. And a long, dormant spark of defiance ignited within me. "I work here, Chloe," I replied, my voice losing its tremor and gaining a note of steel. "I don't require bravery to attend a company event." I turned my gaze to Marcus. He was now congratulating Howard on his recent bonus, a result of that fantastic Project Chimera presentation. Truly groundbreaking work. Howard shifted uncomfortably, and Marcus's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He knew I was the architect of that project. He'd seen my initial drafts, dismissing them as too complicated and a waste of time. "Yes, well," Marcus said, recovering quickly. "Howard's team really knocked it out of the park. Some people are meant for the spotlight, and others, well, they're better with numbers in the background. Gotta know your strengths, right?" He finished with a condescending wink, meant to remind me of my place. He was the star, and I was the stagehand. The humiliation was a hot blush that crept up my neck. He was doing this deliberately, in front of my boss, in front of everyone, to cement his narrative of the triumphant ex and the forgotten wife. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The old panic, the feeling of being small and voiceless in his presence, was choking me. Chloe twisted the knife. "Don't worry, Eleanor. I'm sure your day will come. Maybe they'll give an award for most improved," she said with a tinkling giggle. I stood there, frozen, the cold champagne flute in my hand. This was the moment I had feared. I had walked into the lion's den, and they were about to tear me apart. My carefully constructed armor was cracking, and the ghost I had tried to leave behind threatened to consume me whole. The catalyst. Just as the silence stretched into an unbearable, suffocating blanket, a new presence made itself felt beside me. It wasn't an announced arrival with trumpets, but the effect was much the same. There was a palpable shift in our immediate vicinity. The ambient murmur lessened. Howard Bell straightened his tie and paled slightly. Marcus's expression of smugness flickered, replaced by one of genuine astonishment and deference. A low, quiet voice, smooth as aged scotch, cut through the tension. "Project Chimera. I read that report. It wasn't just innovative, it was visionary. The predictive modeling was one of the most elegant data architectures I've seen in a decade." I turned. Standing there was a man who seemed to command the air around him. He was tall, with a quiet intensity that was more compelling than Marcus's performative charm. He wore a simple, impeccably cut black suit with no tie, a statement of effortless power. His hair was dark, with distinguished silver streaks at the temples, and his eyes, a surprisingly intelligent shade of gray, were fixed directly on me. I had no idea who he was, but clearly, everyone else did. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus stammered, his arm instinctively tightening around Chloe. I didn't realize you were here tonight." Sterling. The name clicked. James Sterling. The legendary, near-mythical founder of Sterling Capital, the private equity firm that had acquired a majority stake in Apex Dynamics 6 months ago. He was the new king on the chessboard, a Silicon Valley prodigy who had turned a small startup into a global empire. He was notoriously reclusive. He rarely attended these types of functions. His presence here was the equivalent of a royal visit. James Sterling's gaze did not leave my face. He gave no indication he had even heard Marcus. "The author of that report is in Howard's department, I believe. I've been wanting to meet them." He extended a hand towards me, his expression one of genuine curiosity. "I'm James Sterling." My mind raced. He thought Howard wrote the report, or maybe he thought it was some other rising star on the team. My moment of choice was sharp. I could shrink back, let Howard or Marcus take the credit as they always did, and remain the ghost. Or I could reclaim my work. My hand, surprisingly steady, met his. His grip was firm and warm. "Eleanor Vance," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I wrote the Project Chimera report." A spectrum of emotions flashed across the faces of our small circle. Howard looked ready to swallow his own tongue. Chloe's perfectly painted smile tightened into a thin line of confusion. And Marcus. Marcus looked utterly stunned. A flicker of disbelief warred with a flash of pure, unadulterated fury in his eyes. James Sterling's eyebrows lifted slightly, a spark of respect in his gray eyes. "Ms. Vance, it is a genuine pleasure. I have to say, your work is the primary reason I approved the next phase of funding. You have a remarkable mind." The validation was so direct, so powerful, it was like a physical shock. For years, my work had been absorbed and rebranded by others. To have the most powerful man in the room not only acknowledge it, but praise it? It felt like stepping out into the sun after a lifetime in a windowless room. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I managed to say. "I appreciate that." "James, please," he said with a small, genuine smile. He then turned his cold, analytical gaze towards Howard and Marcus. "That's interesting. The official summary that landed on my desk had Howard Bell's name as the project lead." Howard started to sweat. "Well, you know, it's a team effort, Mr. Sterling. A great team. And Eleanor is a vital part of that team. In the background, you know, running the numbers. Marcus, ever the opportunist, interjected, trying to claw back control. Exactly. Elle is a genius with the raw data. Always has been. But it takes a certain kind of vision to see the bigger picture, to package it for the boardroom. That's where leadership comes in." He placed a possessive hand on Howard's shoulder, attempting to form a united front. He was trying to relegate me back to my box, the numbers girl, even in front of James Sterling himself. James's expression remained unreadable, but a certain chill entered his eyes. He looked from Marcus's desperate face to mine. He saw the entire dynamic laid bare, the dismissive ex-husband, the credit-stealing boss, and the woman who had done the real work. "The bigger picture is irrelevant if the foundation is flawed," James said, his voice quiet, but with an unmistakable edge of authority. And the foundation of that report, its very architecture, was its most brilliant feature. That isn't leadership, Mr. Thorne. That's genius. He turned his full attention back to me, effectively dismissing the other three. "Tell me, Eleanor, what are you working on now?" It was a lifeline, an opportunity to steer away from the toxic vortex of my past and into a conversation that was about my mind, my work, my future. As I began to explain my most recent project, a nascent idea about leveraging quantum analytics for consumer trend prediction. I felt the weight of Marcus's glare on my back. He was losing control, and he couldn't stand it. The ghost he thought he had buried was not only standing in the spotlight, but she had the rapt attention of the one man he desperately needed to impress. And I knew with a chilling certainty that he wasn't going to let it go. The act of rebellion. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us. James Sterling was a phenomenal listener. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to steer the conversation. He simply absorbed what I was saying about quantum analytics, his sharp gray eyes reflecting a deep, focused intelligence. He asked incisive questions that pushed my thinking. Questions that showed he wasn't just hearing the words, but understanding the complex concepts behind them. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a wife, an ex-wife, or a subordinate, but as an intellectual equal. So, by using a quantum-inspired algorithm, we could theoretically map consumer desire before the consumer is even consciously aware of it, I concluded, a flush of excitement coloring my cheeks. It's still theoretical, of course. The processing power required is immense, but the theory is sound. It's elegant, disruptive, James said, a thoughtful expression on his face. Why haven't I heard about this? I haven't formally proposed it yet, I admitted. Howard felt it was too science fiction for our current R&D budget. A corner of James's mouth twitched. Howard's budget is about to become significantly more flexible. The implication hung in the air, a promise of a future I hadn't dared to dream of. Behind us, I was keenly aware of Marcus's resentment. He and Chloe hadn't moved. They were stuck orbiting our conversation, unable to leave without looking petty, yet unable to join in. I could feel the heat of his anger radiating from across the small space. He had planned to humiliate me, to put me in my place. Instead, he had become an unwilling spectator to my validation by the most powerful man in the room. His ego, a fragile, gigantic thing, couldn't take it. He chose that moment to make his move. Well, don't let little L give you too many hopes, Marcus said, stepping forward with a forced, jovial laugh. He placed his arm around my shoulder in a gesture meant to seem friendly, but which felt heavy and possessive, a mark of his former ownership. I flinched. She's always had these big, fanciful ideas. It's cute, but when it comes to the real world, the boardroom, she tends to get a little overwhelmed. She's more of a backstage kind of person. The condescension was thick enough to taste. He was trying to frame me as a flighty, emotional woman, incapable of handling the pressure of real power. He was using our shared history as a weapon, hinting at a knowledge of my weaknesses that James couldn't possess. He wasn't just trying to professionally discredit me. He was trying to diminish me as a person, to put me back into the box he'd constructed for me. Chloe stood beside him, a small smirk on her face, enjoying the show. My blood turned cold, then hot. The years of being silenced, of being made to feel small, of swallowing my anger and hurt, it all coalesced into a single point of white-hot fury. I looked at Marcus's handsome, condescending face, and I didn't see the man I had once loved. I saw a jailer, and then I looked at James. He hadn't reacted to Marcus's comment, but his eyes were like chips of ice. He was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. His expression wasn't pity, but expectation. He had called my work genius. He had treated me with respect. He was waiting for Eleanor Vance to act like the woman who wrote that report. In that split second, a decision was made. It wasn't logical. It wasn't calculated. It was pure, instinctual rebellion. It was an act of self-liberation. I shrugged Marcus's arm off. I turned to face James, whose surprised eyes met mine. I reached up my hand. I placed it gently on the lapel of his perfect suit. I rose on my toes, and I pressed my lips to his. It wasn't a long kiss. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was a statement. It was a full stop at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. It was the taste of champagne and defiance. For a brief moment, there was a surprised stillness on his part, and then a subtle, almost imperceptible response. A softening of his lips before I pulled away. The entire ballroom, which had been a dull murmur, seemed to go absolute, completely silent. The string quartet faltered mid-note. Every head in our vicinity had turned. The sound that followed was a collective, sharp intake of breath. I lowered myself from my toes, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't look at the shocked faces of the onlookers. I didn't look at James, whose own expression was one of stunned assessment. I looked directly at Marcus, and I watched him freeze. It was as if he had turned to stone. His mouth was slightly open, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated astonishment. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale and sick. The smugness, the arrogance, the condescending charm, it had all shattered, evaporating in an instant. In his eyes, I saw a turmoil of confusion, fury, and something I had never, ever seen there before. Total, complete defeat. He looked at me, then at the billionaire standing next to me, then back at me, his mind unable to compute the reality of what he had just witnessed. His ex-wife, the quiet, mousy numbers girl he had discarded, had just kissed James Sterling in the middle of the company gala. Checkmate. The aftermath, the silence that followed the kiss, was a living thing, heavy and charged. It lasted only a few seconds, but in that span of time, an entire social hierarchy was dismantled and rebuilt. Then the whispers began to erupt, like wildfire all around us. It was no longer about pity for poor Elle. It was about the astonishing audacity of what had just happened. Chloe was the first to break the tableau. Her perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of ugly disbelief. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed at me. Her voice was a venomous whisper, but her words were just noise. My attention, and indeed the attention of the entire room, was on the two men. Marcus remained frozen, a statue of impotent rage. His world had been turned upside down. He, the master of optics and image, had been publicly and spectacularly outmaneuvered. James Sterling, however, was a study in composure. The initial shock in his eyes had been replaced by something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. A mix of amusement and intense calculation. He glanced at Marcus's astonished face, then at the gossiping crowd, and finally, his gaze settled back on me. There was no anger in his expression. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, as if he had just proven a complex theorem he'd been considering. Then, in a move of pure strategic genius, he gently took hold of my elbow. His touch was light yet firm, a clear signal of alliance. "Eleanor and I were discussing a confidential project," he announced, his voice quiet and authoritative, easily cutting through the rising tide of whispers. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." He didn't wait for an answer. He simply began to guide me away from the epicenter of the explosion we had created, leaving Marcus and Chloe standing amidst the social rubble as we walked a path that opened for us through the crowd. As if by magic, the whispers followed us. But no one dared meet my eyes. I kept my head held high, my body vibrating with a terrifying, exhilarating cocktail of adrenaline and fear. What had I done? James led me not out of the ballroom, but through a side door I hadn't even noticed, which opened onto a quiet, deserted balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air was a welcome shock to my heated skin. The distant sounds of traffic were a soothing drone compared to the cacophony inside. For a long moment, we stood there, neither of us speaking. I stared out at the glittering tapestry of city lights, my mind racing. I had just kissed a billionaire, the boss of my new boss's boss, in front of my entire company to get back at my ex-husband. I was almost certainly going to be fired. "Well," James finally said, his voice laced with dry amusement. That was one way to end a conversation. I finally dared to look at him. "Mr. Sterling, James, I am so incredibly sorry. I don't know what came over me. It was unprofessional and impulsive, and He held up a hand, stopping my frantic apology. "Eleanor," he said, and his use of my first name was strangely calming. "First, let's be clear. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for." He leaned back against the balcony railing, turning to face me. "I've been in boardrooms my entire adult life. I've witnessed hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, and brutal character assassinations. And I can honestly say I have rarely seen someone neutralize a threat so effectively, with such precision and economy of motion." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Neutralize a threat?" "Your ex-husband," he clarified. "He was attempting to publicly diminish you, to poison my perception of your capabilities, to frame you as an unstable, fanciful subordinate. He used your personal history as a lever. In return, you used a non-verbal, yet universally understood gesture to completely annihilate that lever. You didn't just get back at him. You changed the entire power dynamic of that room. Brilliant, if you ask me." I was overwhelmed. I had expected anger, or at least a severe reprimand. I hadn't expected a tactical analysis of my impulsive act of defiance. "I just wanted him to stop," I whispered, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving a shaky vulnerability in its wake. "He spent 2 years making me feel worthless, and tonight, when he saw I might have something for myself, something he couldn't control, he tried to take that too." James's expression softened. "I gathered that," he said. "When I read your Project Chimera report, I asked for the preliminary submission records. The initial file was uploaded under your name, Eleanor. 3 days later, it was resubmitted from Howard Bell's terminal with a new cover sheet. The metadata showed that Thorne's VP-level access key was used to authorize the revision. They didn't just take credit for your work. They actively conspired to bury your involvement." The breath left my lungs. It was one thing to suspect, to feel the unfairness in my bones. It was quite another to have it confirmed, laid bare as a set of cold, hard facts by the one man who could do something about it. The betrayal felt fresh, a sharp physical pain. "I had no idea," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "They underestimated you," James stated simply. "And your ex-husband in particular seems to have made the critical mistake of believing his own narrative about you. Tonight you showed him, and everyone else, who you really are." A tear I hadn't realized was coming slid down my cheek. I quickly brushed it away. This was all too much. The humiliation, the defiance, the validation, the shocking revelation. "So what now?" I asked, my voice small. "Am I fired?" James chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "Fired, Eleanor? I don't fire assets like you. I promote them. The quantum analytics project you mentioned, I'm officially funding it. Starting Monday, you will head a new, independent R&D division. You will report directly to me. You can staff it with whoever you want from Bell's team, and your budget will be whatever you deem necessary." I felt my knees weaken. Head of a division, reporting directly to him. It was unthinkable. "I don't know what to say." "Say you accept," he said, his gray eyes earnest. "Don't let them win by making you doubt yourself, not for 1 second longer. Take what you've earned, El." The kiss had been an act of rebellion, a moment of madness, but it had burst open a door I never knew existed. Standing on that balcony, with the city laid out beneath me and the man offering me my entire future standing across from me, I felt the last vestiges of the ghost Marcus had tried to make me finally fade away. The recalibration. Returning to the office on Monday morning was like walking onto a film set the day after a dramatic scene was shot. The air was thick with unspoken words. The usual hum of keyboards and quiet murmuring was replaced by a tense silence that broke into frantic whispers whenever I walked past. I was no longer Eleanor Vance, the quiet data analyst. I was a myth, a legend. I was the woman who kissed the billionaire. My walk from the elevator to my cubicle felt a mile long. People stared openly, their faces a mix of awe, envy, and morbid curiosity. Eliza from accounting gave me a wide-eyed thumbs up. Peter from logistics practically bowed. It was surreal and deeply uncomfortable, but underneath the discomfort was a new, unfamiliar feeling. Power. My actions had consequences, and for the first time, those consequences weren't things happening to me, but things happening because of me. My first order of business was to bypass my old desk entirely and head straight for Howard Bell's office. I knocked once and walked in without waiting for an invitation. He was on the phone, but his face went ashen when he saw me. He quickly mumbled an excuse and hung up. "Eleanor," he stammered, awkwardly rising to his feet. "I was just about to call you. I heard there are some rumors." "They aren't rumors, Howard," I said, my voice even and calm. I placed a single sheet of paper on his polished desk. It was a list of 4 names, the brightest, most underutilized analysts on his team. "Mr. Sterling has approved the formation of a new quantum analytics division. I will be leading it. These are the people I'm taking with me. HR will be sending the official transfer documents this afternoon." Howard stared at the list, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was losing his best people, the very foundation of the team he supposedly led. He was being gutted. "You can't do that," he spluttered. "They're essential for my Q4 practice." "Then you should have thought about that before putting your name on my Q2 project," I replied, without an ounce of malice. It was just a statement of fact. I turned and walked out, leaving him sputtering in my wake. There was no pleasure in it, only a grim sense of balanced accounts. The main event, however, arrived an hour later. An urgent email summoned the entire marketing department to the main conference room. The whispers intensified. My new, temporary office had a direct view into the glass-walled room. I watched as Marcus walked in, his face a tense mask of anxiety. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Chloe was not present. Rumor had it she hadn't shown up for work at all. A few minutes later, the company CEO, Richard Morrison, and 2 board members walked in, followed by a woman from HR. They did not look pleased. The meeting was short and brutal, though I couldn't hear the words. The visuals were eloquent. Marcus gesticulated wildly, trying to explain, to plead. Richard Morrison's face remained impassive. The HR representative slid a thick folder across the table. Marcus's shoulders slumped. He had been so adept at the corporate game, but he had broken the one unwritten rule. He had embarrassed the company in front of its new owner. The king had been publicly slighted, and the board was cutting its losses. He walked out of that room a different man. His swagger was gone, replaced by the hollow gaze of complete shock. His colleagues avoided his eye. As he passed my office, his eyes met mine through the glass. There was no anger left, only a raw, desperate confusion, as if he was trying to understand how the woman he had deemed so insignificant could have engineered his downfall. But I hadn't engineered it. He had built his own guillotine. I had simply released the blade. He was escorted to his office to pack his things, and was gone from the building within the hour. Later that day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Chloe. Her voice was stripped of all its usual confidence. "I just wanted you to know," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "that I left him at the gala. I saw his face when when it happened. He didn't look at me. He didn't even care that I was standing there. All he cared about was that he had lost, that you had won. She took a shaky breath. I was an accessory, a shiny object to make him look good. I thought I was smarter than that. "I'm sorry, Chloe," I said. And to my surprise, I meant it. She had been a willing participant, but she was also another victim of Marcus's consuming ego. "Don't be sorry," she said with a bitter laugh. "You're free, and now I guess I am too. Good luck, Eleanor." My new division was given a prime suite of offices on the executive floor. The 4 analysts I had chosen accepted my offer with stunned enthusiasm, eager to work on something new and exciting. At 5 o'clock that evening, I was standing in my new office, an office 4 times the size of my old cubicle, with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. It was quiet. The chaos had subsided. Marcus was gone. Howard was neutralized. A new future stretched before me, a future built not on one man's approval, but on my own mind and my own merit. The kiss had been the catalyst, the spark that lit the fuse, but the foundation had been built over years of quiet, diligent work. James Sterling hadn't rescued me. He had simply opened his eyes and seen the person who was there all along. The settling of accounts was over, and as I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't an ending. This was a beginning, new growth. The weeks that followed were a tectonic shift, a restructuring of my professional and personal landscape. The theoretical concept of leading a new division became a tangible reality, a whirlwind of intense, exhilarating work. My new office on the executive floor, with its panoramic view of the city skyline, felt less like a workspace and more like a command center for my own life. The ghost of Eleanor Vance, who once haunted the quiet cubicles of the 4th floor, had no place here. She had been replaced by a leader. Building the quantum analytics division from the ground up was the most demanding and deeply gratifying endeavor of my life. My team, the 4 brilliant minds I had rescued from the purgatory of Howard Bell's mismanagement, was a powerhouse of innovation. There was Liam, a caffeine-fueled programming prodigy who saw data streams as a composer sees a symphony. Maria, a quiet but fiercely logical strategist who could find the fatal flaw in any proposal in under 5 minutes. And the twins, Ben and Mark, whose competitive synergy produced some of our most groundbreaking algorithms. We were a small, nimble unit, an island of focused creation amidst the vast ocean of corporate bureaucracy. Our days were a chaotic symphony of whiteboard diagrams, frantic tapping, and the constant, fragrant aroma of fresh coffee. We argued, celebrated, pushed each other past our limits, and for the first time in my career, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My interactions with James were a constant, a gravitational center around which my new orbit stabilized. We had our weekly progress meetings scheduled via video conference, his sharp, intelligent face filling my screen. He was a demanding boss, his questions always probing, always pushing me to defend my conclusions with irrefutable data. He would dismantle my arguments only to force me to rebuild them stronger. In one memorable meeting, he challenged a core assumption of our predictive model. I spent the next 48 hours sleepless, running simulations and digging through raw data until I found the proof I needed. I presented my findings the next day, my voice steady despite my exhaustion. He listened intently, and when I was finished, a slow smile spread across his face. "Good," he had said simply. "I was hoping you'd prove me wrong." It wasn't just a job. It was a mentorship, a high-stakes intellectual sparring match that left me feeling sharper and more alive after every round. Underneath the professional stiffness, however, an undeniable current flowed between us. It was in the way his eyes would hold mine for a moment too long after I had made a particularly relevant point, or the shared, knowing smile we'd exchange when another executive used a tired corporate platitude. The gala and the kiss was the elephant in every virtual room we shared, an unspoken, yet ever-present, silent event. It wasn't an embarrassment. It was the strange, supercharged catalyst for everything that had followed, the foundational event of our entire professional relationship. The proposal one Friday evening, nearly a month after that fateful night. The energy of the work week had finally dissipated. My team had gone home, leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the office. The city outside my window was a glittering tapestry of light against the deep indigo of the twilight sky. I was at the whiteboard, lost in the elegant sprawl of an algorithm, trying to resolve a particularly stubborn latency issue. I was so engrossed in sketching out data flows with a black marker that I didn't hear the soft click of my office door opening. "I thought I might find you here," a quiet voice said from the threshold. I whirled around, my heart leaping in surprise. James was leaning against the doorframe, his presence filling the space. He was dressed in dark, well-fitting jeans and a simple charcoal sweater. The casual attire, a stark contrast to his usual bespoke suits, made him look younger, more approachable, and somehow more real. "Burning the midnight oil, huh?" I asked with a nervous laugh, touching my lips as I capped my marker. My hand felt smudged with ink. "Sometimes the best ideas come when the building is quiet," he replied, his eyes scanning my messy diagram as he entered the room. He moved with an easy, confident grace. He paused at the whiteboard, studying my complex web of notes and equations with a focused intensity that made me feel both scrutinized and seen. "This is brilliant," he said, his voice a low murmur. He pointed a long finger to a specific junction on the flowchart. "You've bypassed the recursive loop. You've solved the latency problem." "Theoretically," I corrected, a blush of pride warming my cheeks. "We still have to build a test environment and run the simulations." "It will work," he said, with an unshakable certainty I was beginning to recognize as his trademark. He then shifted his gaze from the whiteboard, and his gray eyes, so often analytical and demanding, were now soft and earnest as they met mine. "I didn't come here to talk about work, Eleanor." My breath hitched. The professional boundary that had been so clearly defined between us suddenly felt porous, dissolving in the quiet intimacy of the empty office. "Oh," was all I managed to say. "I came to ask you out to dinner," he said, his voice direct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "And I want to be clear, I'm not asking as your boss. I'm not asking as the man you kissed at a gala. I'm asking as a man who is endlessly fascinated by the way your mind works, and who would very much like to get to know the woman it belongs to." His frankness was a rush of fresh air. There were no games, no hidden meanings, just a clear, respectful invitation. The old, fearful part of me, the part conditioned by Marcus's manipulative charm, whispered warnings. But a newer, stronger voice, the one I had been cultivating over the last month, silenced it. This wasn't Marcus, who had seen me as an accessory to his own ambition. This was James, the man who had recognized my value when I was invisible to everyone else, including myself at times. "I would very much like that," I said, and the smile that bloomed on my face felt genuine and luminous, a true reflection of the woman I was becoming. He took me to a quiet, small Italian restaurant tucked away on a cobblestone side street, the kind of place you'd never find unless you knew it was there. The owner, a bustling man named Gino, greeted James with a warm hug and led us to a secluded corner table. The air smelled of garlic, wine, and baked bread. Over plates of fresh pasta and a bottle of rich Chianti, we talked for hours. He told me about his first failed startup, the years of eating ramen noodles, and the stubborn belief that had kept him going. I found myself telling him about my childhood love of solving puzzles, my abandoned dream of becoming an astrophysicist, and the slow, insidious way I had allowed my own ambitions to be subsumed by Marcus's. He listened with a focused empathy that was profoundly healing, making me feel as though my story, my whole story, mattered. Later, as he walked me to the door of my apartment building, a comfortable, easy silence settled between us. The night was cool, and the sounds of the city were a distant, muffled symphony. "For what it's worth," he said, stopping under the warm glow of the entryway light and turning to face me. "I'm glad you kissed me." I felt a surprised laugh bubble up. "You are?" "Yes," he confirmed, a faint, crooked smile playing on his lips. "It was the most interesting and audacious business proposal I've ever received." "And what exactly was the proposal?" I asked, my heart feeling light and hopeful. He stepped a fraction closer, the space between us charged with a soft electricity. His gray eyes searched mine, his expression warm and sincere. It was a proposal to stop looking at the spreadsheets and start looking at the brilliant, overlooked analyst who wrote them. It was a demand to be seen. He paused, and I'm very, very glad I accepted it. I thought he would kiss me then. I wanted him to, but he didn't. Instead, he reached out and gently took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. It was a gesture of connection, not possession, a promise of a beginning, not a claim of victory. It was an act of deep respect, an acknowledgement that I was on my own journey, and he was willing to walk at my pace. "Good night, Eleanor," he said softly, before releasing my hand. I closed the door of my apartment behind me and leaned against it. A sense of profound, lasting peace washed over me. The fire of Marcus's betrayal had been devastating, burning my old life to the ground. But I was learning that sometimes a fire is necessary to clear the land for new growth. I had found my voice, my power, and my self-worth, not in the reflection of a man's love, but in the quiet, steady confidence of my own capabilities. The future was no longer a straight, predictable line someone else had drawn for me. It was a complex, beautiful quantum equation of my own design, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to solve it. Final thoughts. Eleanor's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes our lowest moments are just the launch pad for our greatest comeback. She thought she was walking into a night of humiliation, but she walked out with a future she built for herself. Her journey wasn't about the billionaire's rescue. It was about her finally claiming the power and talent she had all along. It's a story of karma, of resilience, and of the incredible things that can happen when you refuse to be erased. What did you think of Eleanor's moment of defiance? Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up and reclaim your own story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you and sharing these stories of strength. If you were inspired by Eleanor's journey, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Thanks for listening.